Okay. Good morning. It's Monday, January 20th, 2020, 9 a.m. This is the Muscatine County Board of Supervisors. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is to review the agenda. Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Nathan, a second by Santos. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Item number 3 is to receive comments from the public. Anyone wishing to address the board on an issue that is not currently on the agenda? Seeing no one come forward. Item number 4, we have a special guest with us today. We have discussion and possible action to approve Proclamation 01-2020-01, the 19th Amendment Centennial Commemoration. Joni Axel. Joni, would you share a few words?
Good morning. It's nice to be here, and I'd like to first introduce my volunteer colleagues, Chris Weiss and Holly O'Pelton. I forgot my banner, and we aren't going to march, so you need to.
Okay.
This morning we would like to have Muscatine County participate in a 100th anniversary celebration of the right for women to vote, the 19th Amendment. And I know that this may look like a yawn, but I'd love to read this proclamation if you don't mind, Mr. Chair.
That would be wonderful.
Good, good. Whereas in 1848, people gathered together in Seneca Falls, New York, and cited the unfairness of depriving women of the right to vote. And whereas the fight for women's suffrage from the first Women's Rights Convention to enfranchisement lasted more than 72 years, she says with emphasis. With women from all walks of life, political views, and demographic backgrounds asking for the right to vote their opinions at the polls. And whereas Iowa women by the thousands advocated for the right to vote, and suffragists nationwide turned to public education and persuasion. They held conferences, campaigned, lobbied, marched, pleaded, petitioned, and suffered public disdain, violent opposition, and even prison. And whereas suffragists pushed for a single constitutional amendment granting female suffrage on the federal level, dubbed the Susan B. Anthony Amendment. And whereas Carrie Chapman Catt led the national movement, meeting with President Woodrow Wilson to secure his support for suffrage in light of women's contributions during World War I. And whereas it took male allies to support women in their endeavor to vote, for it was sons, husbands, and fathers who ultimately heard the calls of women, and the House of Representatives took a historic vote on May 21st, 1919, followed by the Senate on June 4th, 1919, and 3/4 of the states then needed to ratify the 19th Amendment. Whereas Iowa was the 10th state to ratify the 19th Amendment on July 2, 1919, and Tennessee was the last necessary one, the 36th state to ratify the 19th Amendment, making it the law of the land on August 26, 1920, whereby millions of women were enfranchised. And whereas the introduction, passage, and ultimate ratification of the 19th Amendment were the culmination of decades of work and struggles by advocates for the rights of women in the United States. Whereas the ratification of the 19th Amendment assured women could more fully participate in our democracy and fundamentally change the role of women in the civic life of our nation. And whereas most of the women who began asking for the right to vote never lived to see the enfranchisement of women. And whereas the daughters, granddaughters, and great-granddaughters of the women who fought so hard to vote have been making their voices heard at the polls for nearly 100 years. 2020 is the 100th anniversary year. Whereas women are running for office in unprecedented numbers, making current politicians, both male and female, remember that they follow in the footsteps of these great suffragists. And whereas the centennial anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment represents a historical milestone to be lauded and celebrated. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the County of Muscatine, Iowa, number 1, commemorates the 100th anniversary of the passage and ratification of the 19th Amendment. Number 2, honors the role of the ratification of the 19th Amendment in further promoting the core values of our democracy. And number 3, reaffirms the opportunity for people in the United States to learn about and commemorate the efforts of the women's suffrage movement and the role of women in our democracy. And 4, reaffirms the desire of Muscatine County citizens to continue to strengthen democratic participation. Therefore, that's the last phrase, citizens of Muscatine County shall enjoy the freedom of voter participation, continue to fight for voting rights for all citizens, and celebrate this important milestone by proclaiming the calendar year 2020 to be the 19th Amendment Centennial Commemoration. We would request that the County Board of Supervisors review and approve this commemoration proclamation.
I would move to approve. We have a motion by Scott,
I'll second it.
second by Santos. Any
Thank you.
discussion?
Thank you guys for coming in.
Thank you,
It's
Joe.
incredible. I think it's been 100 years.
All
It is
in-
incredible, but your prize today is going to be a copy of our newsletter.
Scott can remember when
it's
you
only-
didn't have the right to vote.
I was gonna
so-
say, probably all of you.
Tell me that's the truth.
Okay, is there any
Birth of his
further
first
discussion?
grandkid, yeah.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Right.
Opposed, the same? The motion carries. Thank you much for coming today and sharing that with us. Okay, item number 5 is a discussion of possible action on a 3-year funding request from the Vision 2020 initiative with CEO Cheryl Plank and the Board of Directors member John Becky. Morning. Who's first, John?
Yeah, I think, well, actually, together we can work if you want. It's,
Okay, that'd be
you know, we aren't gonna take, we're hopefully not gonna take a lot of your time. We know you're busy, but, we sent some information over, and I don't think we have a presentation planned or anything like that, and I don't think you were expecting that. I guess maybe the best thing, and I'd introduce you to Cheryl Plank, who is our CEO as of about, what, 2 months? And, doing great work. It's been a great gift to have her with us because it's making things progress very well, so we're pretty pleased with that. I don't know if the information you received in the packet was helpful to you, and I don't know whether to try and go over that or just to answer questions about Vision 2020. What would you prefer?
I'm pretty familiar with Vision 2020 and, you know, kind of its beginnings and where it's been, but a number of the board members are not. John, maybe if you could just give a high-level overview. I know the document went through a number of the pieces, but maybe just kind of key time frames and kind of the intent, really.
Sure, I'll do the best I can. Again, it's been a long process, so at my age, the memory of a length of process gets a little harder to put together, but, gosh, you know, it's probably, you know, we probably could look back to around 2018 or 17 for that matter, where a group of people, all volunteers, some, most of them, all of them connected in some form to one of the agencies that is working on collaborative effort, and then just volunteers. And I think, Jeff, even at that time, you were invited to some meetings, United Way. And the goal was, and always has been, to figure out a way to collaborate, be more effective, more efficient, less duplicative, but share in the efficiencies that can be gained by that, and be able to reach out and enjoy the talent of some people like Cheryl and as a common service to the agencies that we're talking about. So talent, sustainability, effectiveness, efficiency, and the agencies that were first at the table was Muscatine Center for Social Action, Senior Resources, and Crossroads. And since that time, Muscatine Welfare Association has always also come to the table. And over the period of time, we had a lot of meetings, a lot of effort to try and even get the collaborative conversation started. And once that got started, we had some strategic planning sessions where, after we had those, the agency signed a letter of intent to pursue this collaborative effort and to research it. And as we went forward, then we got to the point where we could put Cheryl on board. One of the things that happened during this process is Senior Resources had an executive director leave, and at that time, Senior Resources was quite willing to say, you know, we want to pursue this to the degree that we're not going to go out and search and hire a new executive director. We're going to use an interim director, and that actually is, she's in the room, and Joni Axel served, has been serving as interim director for probably almost, is it two? Almost 2 years.
You told me 2 months.
Yeah, I know. But we do what we can. Nobody said, I didn't lie, I just didn't tell you the whole story. But, so we've had that service, and also Crossroads went through a change with their director, their executive director, CEO. And were able to put in place an interim CEO director there as we pursued this collaboration. These were all, things done strictly volunteer, other than, of course, Joni was being paid for her interim directorship, and so was Jim Hayes, who ended up being the interim director at Crossroads, and is still serving there right now. Both of them are still serving right now, but those will wind down here in the months ahead. So we will be doing our thing in a more collaborative, continuing the collaboration, so, and since that time, you know, we had some support. Han Charitable Trust helped us with financing of some of those things. The Magnus Trust helped us with financing of some of those things. We had a grant from the Community Foundation. And since that time, we've gone out, and I think you had a pretty thorough summary of what we've done in funding. So each of those agencies, those 4 agencies, are putting in $20,000 a year for the first 3 years. So they're a major part of that funding, and I think our funding number is somewhere around, the hope to be 600,000, and maybe, actually my hope is to be a little bit more than that, because we want to be able to have Cheryl have talented support in this process, and there's talent at those agencies, but they're busy taking care of what they do in their mission statement, so we need to be able to support that. We also, I'm sorry to do this, it's longer than I keep going, so stop me if you want, but we also see all of those agencies having potential with collaboration of being not just revenue consumers, but revenue generators. And I think that's probably one of the most important parts of this process is when you look at Crossroads and you look at them, instead of just being, and I don't mean just, instead of being a service provider alone, they actually can provide those services and work to generate a revenue stream that helps in sustainability. Muscatine Welfare Association in their housing efforts, and I don't know how much you know about Muscatine Welfare Association, but that's Fulton Place out on Hauser, some group homes, other tax credit projects that they have done totally. Again, that's a volunteer organization, has never had a CEO. So this whole process of them entering into this, they're not possessive of having a CEO or a say as much as doing a better, more efficient work with their dollars and their efforts. And so anyhow, with that, you know, I think the sustainability, effectiveness, collaboration, we just need to have both you on board, maybe somewhat financially, definitely somewhat financially, but also supportive in the effort we're making. And we'll be presenting that same thing to the city in the near future.
John and Cheryl, maybe this is premature or not, but I didn't get clear if there was something that you were looking directly for the board and at what kind of level. You know, I know a number of these agencies, and that's kind of gets into our other discussions, I think, as this whole effort started, you know, there's lots of federal and state legislation that kind of forces what we can do with dollars, and maybe not always what this community is most interested in. I think that's what this group has talked about, valuable resources we think that do good work, and we would want to support those in some manner. And I don't know if you've thought about how you see that working with the board or not, and what kind of things, because a lot of these agencies, you know, over times we have supported those to various extents, and I can give, you know, numerous programs that we work with. But the challenge is becoming more and more from us, a lot of those funds that we use in the tax dollars, are getting more and more restrictive on what we're allowed to do, where they're actually putting handcuffs on this board as to what we can do. And I'm kind of curious as if you've looked at that level of detail yet and thought process, or is it still kind of early on?
Well, let's see if I can come close to answering that question.
Okay,
I mean, the generation of this whole thing back when it started was because of change.
yep,
Because there was change going on both in the process and the work that Crossroads was about to do as far as being a shelter workshop versus integrated work and job skill training and things like that. That the expectation is always in all these agencies is to take the individual and get them into a position where they can be at their best, use their talents the best they can, no matter what their limitations. So that's really the goal of every entity that is currently involved with this. And when we looked at financial parts of it, the financial part long-term is for them to be collaborating, sharing talent, and being able to fund that talent, yes, still through governmental support, but also strongly through their personal or their individual sustainabilities or the group being able to sustain this. So our funding is more about the first 3 years of having someone to put that collaboration together and that person to have talent behind them and support behind them. So that's Cheryl, and her office right now is currently at Senior Resources, and Senior Resources is supporting that. We have certainly been able to fundraise to the point now where we have equipment for Cheryl, she has ability, she's getting paid, she has ability, she has benefits that go along with the Crossroads package of benefits. We're utilizing the current structures to support, because again, Vision 2020 has it's an entity, but it has no physical structure, no office, no employees. In fact, Cheryl is actually an employee of Crossroads, contracted to Vision 2020 to do this kind of work. So when we looked at funding and we did the math, the $600,000 that we're trying to put together is about salary, about support, and about staffing behind this for the first 3 years. Cheryl's a little more aggressive than I am. She doesn't think it's going to take her 3 years. I'd rather say let's give it the 3 years. If we get things going before that, great. Because everything we're doing and everyone we're asking for a commitment yearly up to 3 years, and we've been pretty successful. Well, I'd say very successful. I mean, we haven't had an out no from anyone. Some of them, maybe one of them, hasn't quite reached what we hoped for them as a goal. We have the only ones that we haven't received funding from are people we haven't asked, and this is our first ask to you. And our kind of goal for the county.
that was my next question.
Our goal for the county was to achieve $20,000 a year, just like the different agencies are putting in for these 3 years. So over a 3 year period, $20,000 a year, so $60,000. Is that close to answering your question?
Yeah, I think you hit what I was searching for a little bit. Other board members have questions, comments?
I mean, we haven't budgeted for this before, so I mean, is this something that we would be looking at funding this coming year in July is when you would be looking for this, or?
We would, yes, but we understand and we are flexible. In the long haul, if the only thing that gets slowed is progress, is how well we can look at. One of our things is all of these agencies have an element of housing in them. Housing can be a very successful thing for this community and these agencies. And we are going to need to look at that in some format to pursue. Right now, for example, Muscatine Welfare Association, all of their management of their housing, which they have, 50 units, give or take, might be a little less than that. All of that management is done outside of Muscatine. So revenue goes outside of Muscatine that we could keep here inside these agencies and use with a proper knowledgeable tax credit person, financial person, housing development person. And so, the only thing about funding is the sooner we get started, the better, I think.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of the genesis of a lot of the ideas, right? Because I know at one point in back when I was on the Crossroads board, Crossroads had housing. We had, they had supported community living housing, and I think they still do. They had the sheltered work for certain, they did dayhab and things like that. And I think MCSA over the last few years, if I'm not mistaken, has entered into the housing. They have some transitional housing, I
Right.
believe, if I'm not mistaken. And so, that takes horsepower to run all those programs, and and that's I think the point of this whole effort is, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that, we are gonna be facing some challenges here shortly. I know, Crossroads has always been supported by our community services and our group. Our ability to do that kind of locally with our funds is gonna be more challenged. I think Jim sent out a nice letter to us earlier this year about changes that are happening in March of this year. And those are things, but they do good work, and we have people that are receiving services there. And I think it's important to all of us that continue to happen. And we'll have to figure out how to do that together. I think that's the challenge for us all as we move forward.
Unfortunately, the need doesn't disappear.
No.
It's just, how do you successfully, efficiently, effectively take care of that need and finance it
Yeah, yeah,
with talent,
yeah. And you don't want a lot of disruption, because that's troublesome for this population,
Just
a
makes
lot
it
of these
worse, right?
populations, yeah. Any other comments, questions? Thank you. Cheryl, did you have some things you
Well,
wanted?
the only thing I would add is the goal would be within those 3 years that John's talking about, that I will find the efficiencies and find the effectiveness to do the jobs so that we wouldn't need to come back in 3 years and ask for more money, that we'd find that within all those organizations to be sustainable. So that would be the goal of that.
And all of these agencies, they've all signed to collaborate and come up with a plan of those efficiencies are removing 1 or 2 duplicated jobs, being able to amend those and work
Yeah,
together.
I mean, there's always discomfort in change.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about that, they all signed a letter of intent to pursue this. And I don't know if I provided those to you in the packet,
I think you did.
but they all signed a letter of intent to pursue the collaborative research and to look to this as a forward way and a future. That could, certainly there's 4 agencies that are involved now. We truly believe there may be more that could benefit from this. And we do know that, if the wrong things happen and one agency thinks, if MWA says, well, we're really not gonna pursue a lot more projects or anything else, we're gonna back away from this, it won't keep us from moving forward. Because in the long haul, this is what we believe the answer is collaborative, communicative, efficient work with agencies, sharing financial talent, CFO talent, sharing director talent. Truly, I think senior resources would be one of the first ones to admit, you know what? Do we need a director, or do we just need to have maybe more of a project manager or whatever, and the director can reside in a bigger overall picture? So in the long haul, those things make you more efficient, effective, and sustainable. And then also, how do we create dollars? How do we generate some money? And I wouldn't, Cheryl's, again, at Vision 2020, I can guarantee you this. If this will be done in 3 years, because I won't come back. This is it, I'll come back to report to you, I'll come back to get the follow through of funding, but after that 3 years, if Cheryl's not successful, I will be extremely disappointed, and if we aren't successful before that 3 years, I'll probably be disappointed, because she's already told me she will be.
Well, I just think it makes so much sense. I mean, we look at the success, kind of an integration of operations that the community foundation has provided, and doing the same thing for these types of organizations, I think is just a great idea.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've always seen, you know, in my years on the board, there's lots of agencies, and I don't wanna say it's not, you know, just focused to one area, but a lot of these smaller agencies, that, they're in, you know, you have the people that provide the service, and we wanna make sure we keep our dollars there, and then you have I don't think people understand sometimes the complexity of the funding streams and the rules that you deal with in these organizations, and the cost of compliance that each of these organizations has, and if there's a way that you can streamline that cost of compliance, it's to the advantage, we get more of our dollars to helping people, and I think that's very important. Very good. Okay, thank you so much for coming today, we
Thank you,
appreciate your
thank you for your
efforts.
time, and thank you for your service, we appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys, ladies.
item number 6 are items with the county engineer, Keith White. The first item, number 6A, is discussion and possible action to approve the plan specifications for LCUL 207370 culverts at various locations throughout the county. You didn't say this morning.
Yeah,
Morning, Keith.
good morning, this is our pretty much annual catch-all project, which the DOT allows us to take some smaller projects and lump them all together. And so we have culverts at, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 locations throughout the county. Some of those are culvert replacements, some of them are liners. Questions on that? We'd like to set a letting date, same as we did with the other project last week. But questions on the plans and specs?
Just one question, when you say the liners, what are we lining them with?
It is a heavy-duty PVC liner that you slip through the inside, obviously, and the friction value, is much lower on that, so you can have a slightly smaller diameter pipe and still pass as much or more flow. And we typically do that in areas where they're deep and typically under deeper fills, where it's gonna be very costly to excavate, to open excavate, or literally bore a new one to replace it.
So are those existing galvanized, are they existing cement?
In this case, I think they're all concrete.
Okay.
I have the list here on my phone, if I can find it. There we go. The one on Echo is a concrete pipe replacement, and then there's 4 pipe liners. Liner. And 2 reinforced concrete pipes that are being lined or replaced. But yeah, I think they're pretty much,
And the liners will give us a lifetime of 20 years?
well, you would hope for long, but they're a really
Thick?
thick poly, usually all one piece, so you don't have any joints. By contract, that's usually what they are, they're all one piece.
Okay.
Or if not, there's a welding process.
They'll also handle the runoff like from farm. Where you
Right,
have
right,
livestock and
not
gas.
either way.
They don't break down like the metal does. So,
If it's PVC, that will be better than, you know. Well, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else? Except take a motion on that.
I'll move.
A motion by Scott.
Second.
Second by Santos. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Okay, item B is discussion of possible action to set a letting date for Monday, February 10th, 2020 at 9 a.m. for project LCUL 207370.
So moved.
Motion by Nathan,
Second.
second by Scott. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Item C, projects update.
Not a lot of change from last week, other than we did have our pre-construction meeting on the 120th Street Bridge Replacement Box Project west of West Liberty. And Iowa Bridge and Culvert, the contractor, they plan to close the road January 28th, which those things are not ever written in stone, but to begin construction on that project. And we're still looking at a tentative February date sometime for pre-construction on G28 with them, and I reported this last week, with them mobilizing in March to down trees and construction. They plan to start around the late start date of April 6th. And that's all I really have this morning, pending any questions on anything.
Keith, how did we do with the snow removal and ice this last weekend? How do you feel we did as far as trucks, maintainment, safety of our operators?
Pretty good this last weekend. The storm, the little tiny skin was way worse. Just was. Different type of storm. You know, they put a lot of effort into something that's very difficult. You can see what, you know, a lot of streets and roads look like out there now. And no, we did fine. You know, so the small storm, we had a lot of trucks in the ditch. Just like to remind folks that, and it was almost universally the seal codes, where we have no shoulder. If you're off the edge, you're gone. I mean, we're not state highways with a nice shoulder and nice flat four slopes. So with all the storm before, with all the rain and nothing, everything being saturated, nothing being frozen, you drop the tire off, you're down to the axle and you're stuck. So we had a lot of that. But Saturday was a tough go, but I think they did pretty well. Certainly well within compliance of our snow ordinance.
Good.
Which does not call for clear, dry pavement, and it wasn't achievable.
Yeah, you did. I got ahead of the snow and cleared my driveway like Friday night, and it was worse Saturday because of
Yes.
all the ice that get built up. I shouldn't have done that, should have waited, have been better off.
I did the same thing on the advice of the weatherman. I don't know if you saw that, but better get out there tonight and get it off, and I wished I had left it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you for the update.
I always remind the board that it really is more of an art than a science. Snow and ice control, and as apparently as weather forecasting, at least in the year 2020, it's not much of a science. So.
Thank you.
The editorial comment this morning. Thank you, Keith. Okay, item number 7 is discussion with possible action to approve the minutes of January 13, 2020 regular meeting and the January 14, 2020 special meeting.
So moved.
A motion by Nathan,
Second.
second by Santos. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Correspondence, Santos?
I got the 2 emails that we talked about in regards to questions in regards to Cranston and burial lots that we shared. And staff's following up on that, and then I got another email from, Tim Stevens, who's representing the Lions Club and the South's, Muscatine in regards to the drainage district and if we're looking at any future action, any discussions, and, copied in the city engineer and the county engineer, Keith White, on that as well too, and so, I replied back to him in regards to, any follow-up that we're still in discussion, and I think it's gonna be something that we'll have as a board to discuss in the future in regards to that potential drainage district and looking at ways of either increasing their pumping or finding different future, potential, capital improvements.
This is one, as Santos had that correspondence, I spoke with the mayor, they had an action at council the other night apparently to try to set up joint meetings with the board, which we welcome. Love to have that with the city of Muscatine. And I think, and the question I would have for this board, I think that an update on the levy stakeholders, on the drainage district and all of that with the city of Muscatine, I think these two
Jointly.
bodies should sit down and have
Yeah.
a joint meeting and talk about a strategy or what we wanna do. And maybe even long-term, we can put together groups to go, to work with those,
Yeah.
involved to get something moving forward there. Okay. Just a thought, and then also if you have, I'm gonna be meeting with the mayor, this week sometime. We drive the Bike State Commission together, so I think that's Wednesday. And we talked about potentially looking at potential topics for that meeting, so if you have ideas or thoughts, what might be good with the city and county to talk about, issues to discuss or things, directional,
So that,
forward them to myself or Nancy, and I think she's reaching out to staff to ask them the same, so that we can get some ongoing, communication going.
so we're, basically that meeting is jointly the city, the county.
Yes.
And the school board? Or is it just the city
I
and the
know
county?
that they talked about the city trying to meet with the school board as well. I don't, I always am a walk before you run person. I think the city and county have plenty of things we can work with, but I would.
Okay, so I didn't know it was
would love to
gonna
have
be a-
meetings with
a
the school
three.
board as well. Yeah, I think the city is interested in doing that. They also, some had said that maybe the city of Muscatine, should consider the council having meetings with other cities in the county, and I would love to do that as well.
Yeah.
I know we've talked at Magic and stuff, there are lots of things that the county supports and the city of Muscatine does, but some of our smaller rural cities don't take advantage of these resources that are out there, and maybe if there was a little more engagement from us and other boards that we could help them, because again, it's to the point we heard this morning, a small municipality or township does not have the staff, the professional staffs that the county or the cities have. And I know our staff works hard. I mean, we're down in Fruitland, when they were able to get great advantage when the county ran through town with a road, they were able to get free engineering, so to speak, and that's a good value for a city. And so we like to partner like that when we can, and hopefully those communities are
Yeah,
involved.
good. Well, that's all I have for correspondence.
Nathan?
I also had the emails from the person interested in burial records for a couple of the local cemeteries. Those have been forwarded on, I understand. Sue, is that right?
I forwarded them on to
And
Sue and
Nancy.
she's responded to them, yep.
Awesome. Okay, that's all I had.
I had the same communications. Yeah, we also, the county was notified, just this past week, the Department of Public Health, Iowa Department of Public Health, and the Iowa Department of Natural Resources has concluded their study, and they've issued their report on the slag situation in the county. Eric could say a couple words to us about that, probably here the next day, but we could go ahead and do it now. But we got that report is out. I think we're making it available, or they are on a website or such, and we'll get that information into our minutes. We just got that word back.
Okay. I just had on correspondence, I just had the email as well on the cemetery situation.
That's all I have for correspondence.
Okay, committee reports, Doug?
Committee reports, January 15th, that was last Wednesday, local development met, and I asked them about if they do have an inspector for code in the city, and they said January 16th, we had Muscatine Power and Water. We met at 5 o'clock for the transmission line. They have decided their route, and it will be the cross-country, more than you've seen. And they talked about widening a lot of culverts where they're gonna be entering to put up these lines. And we're talking about what kind of a width they wanted for the top. And they were kind of determining how long the pipe would be, and they were told they need to get a hold of Keith on any of those entrances, because it's gonna depend on the depth of the ditch and how much slope the county requires. You know, so just a heads up, Keith, there's gonna be some permits coming in. Then, on January 16th at 7 o'clock, we met with West Liberty Fair Board, City County Fair Board, so that's all I had.
Okay.
Scott?
On Monday the 13th, Magic, met with Magic. Wednesday the 15th was Riverbend Transit, and that meeting was canceled due to weather, but I was already there. And Randy and I just talked about a couple small issues there at that time, and then on Thursday, Conservation Board, and they've been working on still working on their cabins, and they had some new draftings of where the cabins are going to potentially set, and they're getting them elevated up several feet from where the original thought process was, and they don't have a roadway design completely finished on this, but I think the high water in that situation, that seep water, is a bit of a blessing in disguise on this. I think the location of these cabins are gonna be more appealing. I think the level that they'll be built is going to be less problematic in the future, and I think it's gonna be a real positive thing. That's all I have.
I had no committees.
I had our initial Magic meeting on Monday the 13th. Mainly just an orientation, kind of an initial meeting. Out of my depth of experience on the committee, which is one meeting so far, I've been elected vice chair, so that's exciting. I'm gonna have an orientation meeting here coming up in February. We're looking at a date on that, but that's all I had on committees.
I had no committees.
Okay, item number 10 is receive information from county employees. If you want to just say it, just give a brief synopsis, Eric, and kind of.
I didn't know if you had any specific questions at this time. You know, the report was 113 pages. It's rather substantial, technical. They did provide some talking points. I didn't even know if you'd had a chance to review anything yet, if any specific questions.
I mean, I read through it, and it really, I think, says what we were kind of led to believe all along, is there's no issues, there's no health or inhalation concerns or anything like that they could ascertain.
I think what staff was able to glean, I would agree basically with that, was we did have a conference call with IDPH and the DNR where they tried to summarize in a fairly short amount of time a very large report. Other than 3 locations may present some potential health effects to very limited, specific groups of people. Small children literally playing in the roadway could possibly incidentally ingest enough manganese. It was limited to 1 metal, the possible concerns, and they were very clear at the beginning that there's some very strong assumptions that were made to even reach this possible threshold of exposure. Inhalation was basically ruled out as a pathway threat. So children playing directly in the roadway in 3 locations that had the highest concentrations of slag of the locations that they tested, there would possibly be incidental ingestion to the extent that it could adversely affect the health of children or persons with pica disorder. I think it's important to put this into perspective, that if a person is remaining on the roadway for that period of time to possibly incidentally ingest enough of the substance, I think it's reasonable to assume they're far more likely to be injured by oncoming traffic. You know, it sounds bad, but you really have to put these things in perspective than actual exposure. I would point out that we were notified that the Center for Health Effects of Environmental Contamination, CHEEC is the abbreviation for an organization along with the University of Iowa's Environmental Health Science Research Center, may be doing some ongoing air quality specific sampling along some of these routes. I did get a call from the leader of CHEEC the day after this consultation. They're thinking late spring, early summer, that they may establish some air sampling apparatus in a few locations, just to verify what the DNR's findings were on dust and inhalation. They will be able, this will be air quality monitoring equipment capable of capturing very small particulate matter. They would be able to speciate the different metals, the different types of dust in this, and just go from there to see if the DNR's testing and findings are consistent. So they told us that they would probably be proceeding with that. But again, the head of the Iowa Department of Public Health, one of his statements to us on the phone was literally, keep your kids from playing in this stuff and the risk is minimal if not non-existent. So again, it wasn't anything beyond what we kind of already thought from preliminary testing. It summarized it down. But no direct recommendations were made for the county to do any specific remediation measures, anything like that. And IDPH did advise that they would be available if you would like to have them come down and present anything at a more technical level, or answer questions, they would be available. But otherwise, I think the intent is to post this on our website for the public to review the full report.
Eric, do you think there'll be any information as far as air quality, by next fall? Do you think it'd be anything that soon?
I would say probably so. If the weather and their intentions come to fruition, that they would have this quality, this sampling,
Yeah.
along the routes by late spring.
Yeah.
I don't believe that it takes all that long to analyze the particles that are captured, but that's something that I could follow up on to find out what their time frame. I just was advised that was their ideal commencement time frame, was late spring, early summer, to get this equipment in place.
Eric, do you know if the state agencies were advised we hadn't applied any slag at all to any roadway, I guess coming up on 2 years now?
Yes, they were, and I actually asked a specific question regarding that. We were made aware that these risks are extremely low, given the results of the analysis, the collection and analysis was there. And I asked if it was a fair statement or fair assumption that since we had not been using any more slag, in fact gone to, I believe, just a pure limestone aggregate now, that the numbers that were observed, if it would be reasonable to assume that they would continue to fall. And the answer was absolutely, that would be a very reasonable assumption, that even the areas that had possible levels that would cause possible concern, those numbers should continue to go down as more limestone, because the concentration or the ratio of slag to limestone reasonably falls.
Thanks.
Again, there just really was no alarm bells sounded, so.
Thanks.
I guess I'd like to get a copy of the report.
I emailed it to you, I believe, on Friday.
Yeah.
Do you want a paper copy?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep, we can do that.
Eric,
It's a pretty exciting read.
Especially if it's 113.
just
Yeah, I read it. It's
a question, when this air monitoring starts going into place, which I think you mentioned it might be in the spring, what prevents us from not knowing for sure if we're gonna get a lot of like when the farmers start tilling or they start moving a lot of dust, that doesn't actually start changing that air monitoring versus what it would be from a natural, hey, the crop's already in, the wind's not blowing, everything's already set. you would actually not get a true sample of what's out there versus if somebody does that and they put it in the spring and the farmers haven't even tilled yet. It's just something that, I mean,
Right.
I would bring that to point out because there's some areas you could start getting some really dusty areas when they start tilling, and if they put one of those monitors right there, they're gonna say, oh, look at, the county's got
But
all
I
these
think
bastard
they've
roads.
kind of assured you or indicated to you that they could tell the difference between what it is.
Right. Yeah, because they'll be looking for these.
If they're only looking for manganese and things like that, it maybe, you know, especially when they're spraying or when they're doing other things, I don't know.
They'll certainly be looking for those metals that this study looked at to try to verify the findings of the IDPH and DNR testing. But they did guarantee that they also have the ability to identify the dust that comes from limestone versus the dust that comes from slag. You know, we don't know what
Okay.
these, and so I don't believe normal farm tillage in the spring would result in kicking up high levels of manganese or cadmium or silica that may be present in limestone. And, you know, while there may be other agricultural products that are applied that aren't the best to breathe in, those should be identifiable from the metals that they'll be verifying fairly easily. So, and they're going to probably place these fairly close to residences along the route, because those were the areas, obviously, would be worst case scenario if there's a person
Okay.
whose house is close, because they need a power source as well, so they did mention that they would probably have them in volunteer locations next to a house or a building where there's a power source, so that may take you a little farther away from open farm ground that you got sedimentation going airborne.
Just, yeah, it was just a thought when you started mentioning that. Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, Eric. All right, item number 11 is items with the administration office. Item number 11A is discussion possible action on the mental health region governing board. This was we'd had a note, and, you know, there, as many of you are aware, we've indicated that we were in a transition process to the SEAL region. We've had discussions in the last few days, weeks, with the current governing board of Eastern Iowa. Nathan, maybe give a summary of kind of
Sure.
where we are and what we're talking about doing here.
Sure. So, as you know, we're kind of straddling two fences right now. We're looking at trying to join the SEAL and aligning our services with them, and Jeff's been has been appointed our person to the SEAL, and then we still have a foot at least till the end of the fiscal year in June in the Eastern Iowa region. As the vice chair, the vice chair last year, the 2080 agreement specified that I become the chair of the Eastern Iowa region. Obviously, that doesn't make a lot of sense if we're going to be leaving at 6 months in. So, you know, we've been talking with you know, the guy from Scott and the guy from Clinton County, figuring out exactly how to transition that. And I think what makes the most sense is, rather than try and futz with the 2080, we have our first meeting, which is next Monday. I'll be the chair. I'll immediately step down, pass it on to the other Eastern Iowa leadership members there. And I think we talked about, was it Jeff had talked more directly, but Jim and
Yeah, I
Ken
think,
taking a.
yeah, I don't, you know, they'll go through a vote process, but I think it, you know,
Yeah.
probably you know, depends on what the governing board, but I think the indications are that probably be Scott County.
Yeah.
Ken back from Scott County.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, I think, and then with us hopefully going into the SEAL region then in 6 months. The other thing that makes a lot more sense is, rather than have two people trying to do the mental health job, Jeff, since you're looking at the membership in the future, we just consolidate the two, and whatever involvement we still have in Eastern Iowa, it's really just winding up at this point. You would handle that as well, so that you and I don't have to sit down and debrief every single time we have a meeting. So I'll be stepping off of that, I think, and I think we also, in our discussions with the other board members in Eastern Iowa, were able to resolve the issue where they wanted to kick us out, and we asked for mediation, and we think everybody says that's just silly to go through all this for another, at this point, 5 months. So I think that's all gonna back down. We'll just remain in the region through the end of the fiscal year. And we've already agreed to pay what we can when we can toward the end of that fiscal year. So hopefully we'll be able to contribute. Yeah, that's pretty much, hopefully all the drama that we've had will quiet down and we can just get on with continue to get on with what's moving forward with what's best for the folks in Muscatine County that we serve.
So I guess, I think the motion would be that the board authorize Nathan in his role, to relinquish the chair. I think we would also want to talk about that we would want to withdraw our request for mediation, so that that's off the table of the Eastern Iowa region. What else would we need to do to clean that? I think that's about.
Do they would need to take action to appoint you?
And then you would need
Yeah,
an
just-
action for me to take over that appointment and just serve as our mental health region, whatever region that might be as we move forward.
So let me give this shot. I will move to, one, authorize me to relinquish the chairmanship of the Eastern Iowa region. Two, we'll consolidate the mental health positions under Jeff. And what was the other one? Withdraw the mediation request.
Mediation request to the Eastern Iowa.
Again, with the understanding that the press to kick us out is also withdrawn.
Right, and we have already indicated, I think, in past actions, that our intent is to pay the $311,000 transfer payment that's this year. And I think we have a piece due now that we've said we could pay, pending they're not throwing us out, because we need the dollars to fund our current activities. So that's the motion. I have a motion,
Second.
and I got a motion by Nathan, I got a second by Doug. Any discussion?
Do you need to put that on the agenda for that seal, or for the mental health Eastern, that you're gonna do that?
It's
To take
already
that
on the
action?
agenda.
They're on the agenda
Okay, yeah.
they have to, because
They have to
their
select
first
the chair.
meeting of the year, they have to seat the new chair and then select. The process is, in this 28E, the vice chair automatically becomes chair, so that's not an option. And then they elect a vice chair, who then will be the automatic succession. And then they redo their secretary and whatever, they have 3 positions or 4.
Secretary, Vice Chair, yeah.
Yeah, so they do that, so that way, if Nathan steps down, then they can vote a new chair, and then that new chair then they can vote a vice chair and go through that process, and in the first meeting, because that's an automatic, it's per the 2080, it has to.
And I should specify that consolidation of the 2 positions in Jeff is effective after all that stuff with Eastern Iowa.
So then there's no complication with the
Yeah.
2080 in the process, we can just get it done. Okay,
Good.
any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. All right, item 11B, discussion of possible action to appoint Terry Eagle to fill one of the 2 vacancies on the Muscatine County Historic Preservation Commission for a 3-year term ending January 1st, 2023.
So moved. Terry's great.
I have a motion by Nathan,
Second.
second by Scott. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'd like to thank Terry for his willingness to
Will be very good.
help. All right, item C, discussion possible action to approve 2 position regrading and 6 step placement recommendations.
This we talked about in some detail last week when we were reviewing the sheriff's budget. This regrades the lieutenants and the correction lieutenants and correction sergeants at the jail. And then determines, what our salary administration program says is when you regrade a position, if you upgrade the position, it's a board determination which step that they actually fall on. And so, working with the sheriff and the chief deputy to kind of figure out what made sense there, my recommendations to you were outlined in the memo that was included in your packet for each of the individuals.
Any questions about that? I'd look for a motion.
Move to approve?
I have a motion by Santos, second by Nathan. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Item D is to review the health and dental fund balance as of December 31, 2019.
And that spreadsheet's in your packet. As you can see, we're holding our own, building a little fund balance for the first 6 months of this fiscal year.
Yeah, looks like we're not really, we're gaining a little, but not much. It's still up in the air whether we're, looks like our rates are set about right.
Yep.
Good. Okay. Very good, thank you, Nancy.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
I don't have anything else.
Okay, so we're gonna go into some budget hearings here, so we're gonna take a brief recess. It's 10 o'clock, we'll come back at 10:05. Then we'll go through budget requests. All right.